So, a few comments, I guess, about the ending. I really like that the ending boss fight was that, especially because it's something that I've always wanted throughout the whole time. Actually, I was begging for a boss fight every time, and every time the chapter ended when it seemed fit for a boss battle, the developers decided not to include a boss battle for whatever reason. And it was so weird because boss battles and big epic fights were a huge part of the first game. It's because, I don't know, it's just what American McGee's Alice was all about. And I like that this one was more story focused, but I also didn't like that the story came around only at the, I believe, last quarter. Like all the story just came together at the very last, I believe, few episodes actually. And there were a lot of dead space in between the chapters when nothing significant happened and nothing new basically happened. And I think they could have cut about, I don't know, an hour worth of gameplay that they've devoted into the mini games and all the puzzles and all the platforming, because honestly they were good refreshers from, constant fighting, constant jumping, constant collecting. But at a certain point, they became just, how would you say? They became irritating almost. It seemed like I didn't really want to do those puzzles anymore, those mini games, especially the one where you're ahead and you have to roll through a bunch of things. Like, I didn't like that at all. I think that could have been designed much better. Other than that, I think the story was pretty engaging, except for my little criticism that the story actually didn't happen until the very, very, very last couple of hours. I do like the memories. I wish that I had paid more attention and found all the memories, because I know I missed a bunch of pig snouts and keyholes because, I don't know, I just didn't look hard enough. And at first, I was resistant to finding memories instead of teeth because the memories weren't doing anything. But now I see what they were doing. They were just kind of waiting it out until the very end to just explode the entire story in your face. And I think, that's a good tactic, but I think they could have spread the story out a little thinner across the board so that the entire gameplay could have been story-based rather than combat and just mechanics alone. As far as art design and art direction, I think this was a really, really neat idea, and I think this is a very, very fitting sequel to American McGee's Alice. The art style was probably my favorite aspect of this entire game. And I kept gushing and I kept saying how awesome all the textures were, all the art, Alice's dresses, all the enemies, how fluid the combat looked, how pretty everything looked even when she was jumping and even when she was falling to her death. Everything looked very, very nice and well thought out. The combat itself was fluid most of the time, except when I ran into little bugs here and there, but they were game-breaking bugs. And sometimes it was very, very frustrating to play with those bugs, knowing that they existed. Sometimes I was able to exploit those bugs, and I don't know. I don't think that's something you want to consistently present in a game that is so combat-focused. Also, I think the weapons could have been balanced out a little bit more. I think the Vorpal Blade or the Hobby Horse or the Pepper Grinder actually could have used a little bit of more damage or something more special to them, because right before the Teapot Cannon, I was having so much trouble. And then right after the Teapot Cannon, the rest of the thing was a breeze. Every combat, I would just run around and throw Teapot Cannon things all over the place. And once I had that fully upgraded, it didn't really matter what kind of enemies I was going against. I just had to run around in circles and throw Teapot Cannon balls. I think the team could have worked together a little better because it was a little combat heavy in the beginning. To be very honest, it was way too combat heavy in the beginning, and at the end, it was completely void of combat. And I kept mentioning that, and I was very disappointed that combat didn't get increasingly interesting as the game went on and your weapons were fully upgraded. But I think, everything has its flaws and everything has its, good sides. And I think that was one of the biggest weaknesses of Alice Madness Returns, which is too many sequences of intense combat in the beginning, followed by a complete lack of interesting or engaging combat towards the end. Which is weird because you don't get your weapons upgraded until the very end. So in the beginning, you're fighting a bunch of combat with level 1, level 2 weapons, and at the end, you're just fighting very, very easy battles no matter what. Other than that, I think a lot of the story was executed almost flawlessly. It had me guessing until the very, very end. And the art direction, especially towards the end with the dollhouse, and the final boss scene, and the castle, the train, I think that was phenomenal work. I think these people did some excellent work, and I'm very excited to see what the sequel to this would look like. Now, they did purposely open it up for a sequel, and at the time of release, I'm pretty sure it didn't look like there was gonna be a sequel, just because I think American McGee expressed some discontent working with Electronic Arts. But I believe he started a Kickstarter campaign to develop the next Alice without Electronic Arts. So he's buying the rights. Hopefully that comes through, and I think it's safe to say that if that ever gets developed, I'll be first in line to pre-order it. Although, now that I think of it, had Electronic Arts not been involved, the story could have gone much farther. I think the writers held back a little bit because the story that I was thinking, and I think you guys have a feeling of what I was thinking, was very, very dark, but it was fitting at the same time. And a lot of the psychological aspects of the story could have fit in perfectly. I don't know, I have a lot of good things to say. I have a few criticisms here and there, and I've made all of those known throughout the episode. Also just because I'm a huge fan of the first game, and that's naturally one of the reasons I picked this up and played it. But I don't regret any of it. There were a lot of parts when I was so frustrated with how poorly it was put together. There were a lot of glitches, there were a lot of crashes. If you notice throughout the plays, there are a lot of frame rate drops. I don't know why it's happening, but it happened a lot. The game crashed on me actually 6 times before I was able to get rolling. So I recorded an hour 6 times in a row. So it was pretty painful getting this started. But once it got rolling, I stopped having any kind of problems. Luckily, because if it kept on crashing the way it did, I would have had to play everything over and over. So, but that comes with any kind of independent work. You can't ever comb a project like this, a project so huge in scope, in story, in everything. There were just different worlds, completely different textures, completely different enemies to program, and I understand that bugs are bound to happen, glitches are bound to happen, crashes, although not preferred, will happen. And it could have used a lot more technical polishing. But other than that, I think this was a solid platformer with elements of puzzle, a lot of combat in the beginning, and not much at the end. And I did say that it could have ended in either a huge epic battle, or a series of cutscenes, or a puzzle, like a platforming sequence. It did kind of all of that, and I wasn't going to be disappointed if it ended with her going through the train and talking to all the Wonderland characters that she visited over the course of the story, and just talking to them, apologizing or whatever, and them telling her, you've destroyed Wonderland, you need to fix it. And if the game was tied up with a cutscene of her just pushing Dr. Bumby into the train, I think I would have been completely okay. I still don't understand why the insidious stuff, the black goo, was related to her father's photo developing tools. Maybe it's just because Dr. Bumby was kind of related to her father, as in he was a student of sorts. And that wasn't very clear. We don't exactly know the relationship between Dr. Bumby and her father. Maybe they were friends, and he liked to come over. I don't know. I think that the cutscenes, the 2D cutscenes, they kind of look like paper cutouts. I think those are also really, really well done. I'm very happy with the way they decide to go with that in terms of art direction. I don't know, it's just the style just fit in so well. The hand illustrated style fit in so well with this kind of world and story and just the feel of the game. I think it built up a nice atmosphere too. One thing I do want to note is I still don't like ice snarks. And you guys know this, but a lot of hours were lost fighting ice snarks in a very small area. And I think that I think I will forever be scarred by that memory of being stuck in a small pit with a menacing ruin and 3 ice snarks. Again, thank you guys so much for following me through this set of Let's Plays. I know it was a little rough around the edges, but hopefully, eventually, I'll get to improve and bring you better quality work. Alright, just let the credits run for a few more seconds. Thank you for sitting through this review with me and watching the credits. This is Anything Third Person signing out.